Good morning, Year 11. This is a quick video to help you out with your 1.4 homework, the extended paper 2 question 5. Now, like any paper 2 question 5, it's just important to really remember why it might be that this is one of the questions that you want to answer first in the exam. So paper 2, so I'm just going to write here, paper 2, question 5 is, we must remember, 40 marks. Okay, it's really important to remember that it is that many marks, and that mark is divided into two sections. AO5, which is the content, is how interesting your story is, and that is 24 marks. And then AO6, which is 16 marks, and that is your SPAG. Okay, content. Now, when it comes to planning your piece of creative writing, I recommend that you do. I wouldn't necessarily do like loads of planning, maybe making massive lists of techniques or anything like that, but I'll just come up with the 3 ideas that I definitely want to write about. So for example, here I've got the statement. So I've got nurses are overworked because people abuse the healthcare. So nurses are overworked because people abuse the healthcare. It's kind of got two sections to this one. And then it says, let me get another highlighter. And then it says, if people had to pay, they wouldn't be so quick to go to hospital with silly problems. Now, when I look at that statement, I definitely agree that nurses are overworked. I'm not saying that nurses are overworked, but I think the statement is more about that fact that people abuse free healthcare, and that they wouldn't abuse it if they had to actually pay for it. Now, thinking about being a bit of a socialist, I'm going to actually disagree with the statement. I'm going to say that actually people use the NHS as best as they can and when they really, really need to. And that it is important for them to check if they're not well or if they are ill. And therefore the system is there to make sure that everybody gets gets that support. Okay? Now it says here, write the text for an article. Now that becomes important because it's telling me what type of text do I need to write, and then it says arguing for or against that statement. Okay, so the first thing that I like to do is I always like to remind myself, well, what does an article look like? So an article looks a bit like this. It's got a headline, and then it's got the main bits of text. Okay, so you've got a headline at the top, headline at the top, and then you've got your main bits of text. Remember, for the exam, you do not put it in columns or anything like that. You just write your main bit of the text. Now, when it comes to your headline, you want to use something like maybe a rhetorical question. It's always a good one to start it with. A rhetorical question, or you might want to use something like a simile, or you might want to use something where you use a colon. So you say, overworked, colon, nurses need time off. Now, that doesn't really fit in with my idea, but that's how you would use a colon at the beginning. And by doing something like this in your headline, straight away, you are actually getting marks for not only AO5, but you might also be getting marks for AO6, depending on what you're doing. Now, I also like to think that sometimes you might want to use maybe a bit of humour in your headline. So make it a bit funny, a bit interesting. So for example, because I disagree with the statement, my headline is gonna be like something like this. Should you get that broken leg checked? Okay, so that's going to be actually my headline for mine. And that suggests that I disagree with the statement, because a broken leg is a serious kind of accident, the answer straight away to that would be like, yes, of course, I should get my broken leg checked. So it just kind of adds a bit of humor to my answer. Now, the way that I would plan my ideas is actually I would get 3 different ideas, just as sentences, ready, and then when I start writing, then I start expanding those. So the first reason why I disagree that that this statement is wrong is because accidents are often serious, and we know that the waiting queues are for serious accidents. So I'm going to talk about actually how actually when you are in an accident, something happens to you, you tend to go to A&E, you tend to go to the doctors, and that is important that you do. Okay. The next bit that I'm going to say is about actually some illnesses are hard to spot, and I might put something here of better be safe than sorry, for example. And in particular here, I'm going to talk about men, because men, for example, are one of those groups of people that don't go to the doctor enough, and then they don't get checked, and then they're ill. So actually, that is like a group that I might mention. And then the last bit is I'm going to talk about actually kind of it's not that people are abusing the system, it's just that the NHS, for example, I'm not talking here about the NHS, is actually underfunded. So like nurses are overworked. That's because not enough nurses. I'm going to put here not enough sources, not a system that is not well structured. Okay, so I've put kind of, they are going to be my 3 main paragraphs. Now, when it comes to actually structuring my idea, and when it comes to writing my idea, I would go for a 5-part paragraph. Now, you can see the 5-part paragraph actually in your knowledge box. So in your knowledge box, on page, well, you have to go to paper 2. So paper 2, let me find it. Paper 2, question 5, opinion writing. You've got this page here. Okay, now this page here talks about the way that you can structure your answer. So you start with an introduction where you make your opinion really clear, and then you've got your 3 points, the because, and but. Now sometimes you might want to offer a solution. Now I don't always do this one. If I run out of time, I literally leave that one out, and then I bring it back to the point. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 5-part paragraph. Now, remember, it's not about writing loads, it's about writing something well and well structured, and that makes sense, okay? So, if I'm thinking about my 5-part paragraph, I'm going to start with the beginning, so an introduction. Now, my introduction needs to be as engaging as possible. So, I'm not going to yet cover this bit here, okay? My introduction is looking at the bigger picture of the world. Okay, the bigger picture. Now, I like starting my pieces when I do that with either an imperative, so for example, imagine, or picture this, or in a world. They are really good. So I'm just going to put it here, imagine, full stop, and then I do imagine again. I might do picture this, picture, and then I go on to write what I need to write. Or I might do in a world where, sorry. So why is the thing that I'm writing such a big issue? So for example, I might do something like this. So I like using imagine because then you can start with a negative way, and then at the end you can repeat the same structures and make it positive. So I might start something like, for mine, I might do something like imagine. Imagine a world where you slip on a banana, bang your head, but you don't go to hospital. Imagine. I'm going to use a bit of anaphora here. Imagine a world where you have a growing bump, but you don't check it out because of long waiting queues. And you don't be a burden. Imagine an empty hospital. Imagine an empty hospital because no one thinks they should use the services. Should you visit the doctors if you are ill? Of course you should. Now, this would be my first paragraph. This would be my introduction. Now, look at the way that already here I'm using a range of techniques. So I'm using an imperative to engage the reader. But not only am I using an imperative there, I'm also using anaphora. So I've got imagine, but I've got it here, imagine, imagine, and here, imagine. Now, my examples of what I want the reader to imagine is how not using the doctors or not going to the doctors would be a really silly thing. So, for example, if you lift on a banana and bang your head, but you don't go to a hospital, that can lead you to be ill and worse with a concussion. Imagine that you have got a growing bump or lump, actually, rather than a growing bump. I might put here a lump, but you never get it checked. Now that links a tiny bit to my idea of men not going to the hospital and checking things out, but you don't want to wait in the queues or you don't want to be a burden. And then actually the logic of like the majority of people that go to hospitals are people that are actually ill. So I'm saying how imagine an empty hospital because nobody wants to check the services. So there, I've got like a really, really strong paragraph. Now, when it comes to the main bit of my argument or my essay, then I have got it planned. I've done this, and now I can straight away get onto my 3 ideas. So my first point, or my first idea, as you've got it here, is my because. Okay, so, oops, sorry, you can see that. It's my because. So this is idea 1. Now, my idea 1 here, idea 1, is about accidents often are serious. So, accidents are often serious. So what I then would do is kind of develop that idea by actually giving an example of a serious accident and the dangers of not going to this hospital, explaining why hospitals are there, and then maybe developing my idea. So it's really important that you kind of make this your topic sentence, and then you give an example. So accidents are often serious. For example, quite often young children, when they're playing football at the weekends, they get banged on their heads. Young children suffer from slow concussion. Now, because they are young and because quite often they're active, people sometimes don't think about taking them to hospital. This could be dangerous because, okay? So you're trying to develop your idea. Then you will go to idea 2. And again, for this one, I've got illnesses are hard to spot. So I'm putting it out, sorry. Illnesses are hard to spot. And again, I will do the same thing. I will give an example. I would explain it. And then I will try to develop it. And here's where I might use some facts. The fact that men are less likely to go to the doctors, and then they end up with really serious illnesses like testicular cancer or something like that. But also that, yeah, there are illnesses there that unless you get it checked by a doctor, you won't know if you've got them. Now, your third point, your third because, you might want to do this one as a bit of a counter argument. And the counter argument might come from the fact that people say that people go to hospitals for silly problems. So I might say, some people say, the NHS is being abused. But, now this becomes really important, but I believe it is just underfunded. Okay? And I might say here, to make that obvious, I might say, who wants to spend 4 hours in a waiting room? Just to show how that is the most illogical thing to say about like people misusing the system. Who would want to spend 4 hours in a waiting room? And again, with this paragraph, I will give an example. I will explain it. And then I'll try to develop it. Now, in the process of all this, in these ones, I definitely try and use maybe sometimes a simile. I might use anaphora again, that's a really good one. Or I might use a metaphor. Sometimes facts or statistics. But again, it's not about using loads of them. It's about using them once or twice and using them in an effective way. And then the end, so I'm just going to kind of show you the end of my paragraph. The end of my piece, would go as follows. So I go back to my point, and this is my conclusion. Now, in my conclusion, I like to use a bit of a cyclical structure. So I tend to go back to my imagines. And rather than having negative things, I tend to write positive things. So I might do this. So I might say something like, imagine. Imagine. So it says, imagine a world where you slip on a banana, bang your head, and you don't go to hospital. Imagine having the reassurance that you are not concussed from a fall. Full stop. So I'm going to do again. Imagine. What was my other imagine? Imagine a world where you have a growing lump. Imagine finding that growing lump was not malignant. My last one. Imagine a hospital waiting room where people are getting the help they need. Should you go to the hospital to get that broken leg checked? Of course you should. Now, the last bit of this piece is using a bit of a cyclical structure. So I'm using imagine again. So I'm using anaphora, and then he makes it engaging. But on top of that, one of the things that I've done is my last use of hyperphora, when you ask a question and then you answer it yourself, I've repeated from my title. This is from my actual title. If you remember, my title was, should you get that broken leg checked? I said, should you go to the hospital to get that broken leg checked? Of course you should. So again, like what I'm doing is, by the end of my article, the reader knows that I exactly think that people should be using the hospital services, they should be using the NHS, regardless of whether they think they're not ill or they are. And then writing like this in a really engaging way can get you, well, at least, it's about aiming for half marks. It's about aiming for a level 3 response. Do check, like I like these already set structures because then it reminds you to always use a capital letter and a full stop. It also has a variety of sentence structures. So I've used a minor sentence here, but now I've got a simple sentence there. Bank your a banana, bank your head. Yeah. But oh no, that's a compound sentence because I got a but there. So straight away, you're showing the examiner that you can use a range of techniques. So this paragraph not only gets me AO5 marks because it's written in an engaging way, it uses a rhetorical question, it uses anaphora, but it also gets me SPAC marks because I've got a range of sentence structures. I'm using commas accurately, I'm using question marks accurately, I'm using full stops accurately. It's about making sure that you gain as many marks as you can. Okay? Hopefully you found this one helpful. A bit longer than other videos in the past, but it's because I wanted to give you a bit of an example of a paragraph that you could write. Okay? Alright, thank you very much, Year 11.